let's talk about this. Back in the United States, of course, there's a big debate right now happening around guns, gun crime, and there were at least 10 mass shootings, if you can believe this. 10 mass shootings over the weekend in the United States. Here's the Wall Street Journal headline over the weekend. Take a look at this. Gun violence results in at least 10 mass shootings over the weekend. 5 dead, about 24 other wounded in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Philadelphia shooting. Shootings in Philadelphia, Chattanooga, Tennessee left 5 people dead, about 24 others wounded over the weekend, adding to the growing tally of U.S. gun violence. That's the Wall Street Journal headline. So right now, of course, facing a huge debate over gun violence that I think has gotten lost is the incredible hypocrisy of the United States Congress when it comes to sending guns to overseas, into war zones. Members of Congress like to pretend that they are on your side when we have mass shootings at home. Both parties go into their normal positions. Democrats say enough is enough. We need to make it difficult for legal gun owners basically to buy weapons as their only solution. That's all they can come up with. Getting rid of semi-automatic weapons, which affects handguns also. That's really their only solution, addressing the real problems of violence. They won't address the real problems of violence and poverty in their cities. They won't acknowledge also that a number of these, almost every one of these mass shootings has one big thing in common. There's no father. There's no father in the family. No father figure, disappeared. They won't talk about that. Republicans, for their part, say they have a right to defend you have a right to defend yourself, and it's all about freedom to protect your family, while hiding the fact that these Republicans take enormous campaign contributions from weapons manufacturers. So these two sides immediately go into this like duck and cover position as soon as we have another school shooting. They seem totally at odds with one another, but the two are remarkably in lockstep with one thing, right? One of them is that they absolutely stand together, especially when we are going to ship the same amount of weapons, the same exact type of weapons that they're talking about banning in the United States. They're totally in lockstep. Both parties are like this. Like they might as well get together and kiss when they're going to ship copious amounts of weapons into Ukraine. That's where they are totally in lockstep. Michael Tracy wrote a great piece on this hypocrisy around the AR-15 specifically. And he pointed to this tweet first by blue check liberal Michael McFaul. And he said this. This is what Michael McFaul says in his tweet. To all the manufacturers of AR-15s, please stop. Just do the right thing, and the rest of us might consider stopping to focus on legislative solution. Instead, focus on a nonviolent civic resistance campaign against these AR-15 makers directly. Well, so here's Michael Tracy's article that he wrote on Substack. Really, really good piece. And he says, surprise, the Texas shooter and the Ukraine military get their AR-15s from the same place. Are we surprised by that at all? I don't think so. I'm not surprised by it. Are you surprised by it?
No,
okay.
I'm not.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Are you going to say more on that? I am just thinking through, keep going. Keep talking.
Okay.
And I will formulate my thought on that.
Okay. So Brian Kastner is a war crimes investigator for Amnesty International. So here's Brian Kastner. He's a war crimes investigator for Amnesty International's crisis team, specializing in bombs and bullets. Okay. This is what he does. He investigates war crimes. So he tweeted, you know what? I think that I'm going to have here's what he tweeted. History predicts that someday I'll be tracking some of these same weapons to a new conflict that hasn't even started yet. And then he's pointing to the fact that even before this war took out, 25,000 anti-aircraft weapons, 10,000 General Milley had already allocated all of these weapons were going to Ukraine. So Brian's point is that history predicts like all of these weapons that are going into Ukraine, no, they're already being sold on the black market. We're going to be tracking these things.
Yes.
They're going to be in all kinds of other war zones.
In fact, sources from the Pentagon have already admitted that to CNN, that most of the weaponry that is being sent into Ukraine is not being tracked. And
right.
we've sort of calculated as a sunk cost. Like we're not sure where it's going. We're kind of okay with that.
Right. So remember, Democrats currently want to lower the voting age right now to 16. Just keep that in mind. So Democrats have been pushing we got to lower the voting age to 16 years old, right? And in certain states, you can't even drive at 16 years old, right?
Yes.
And they also want to keep the draft age, okay, to 18 years old. So they want to Democrats want to lower the voting age to 16, and they want to keep the draft at 18 years old. Well, very few members of Congress voted against sending $40 billion in weapons to Ukraine. One of them was Representative Tom Massey of Kentucky. Now, he got in it with Gerald Nadler, during a House discussion on firearms. This is a fascinating moment because Jerry Nadler is basically saying, hey, we know that the data is in. The human brain is not developed even at 18. You need to be like 21 years old to have a fully developed adult brain, right? Maybe it's even later than that.
It is actually. Yeah.
It's even
Your
more
brain
than 21.
continues to develop until I think 31.
Yeah. So again, 16 years old to vote, 18 years old to go to war, 21 years old to drink. Listen to this back and forth between Jerry Nadler and Tom Massey as Democrats are now trying to raise the gun ownership age to 21. Listen.
We recognize different ages for different purposes. We recognize 18 for the draft. We recognize 16 for driving in some states. We recognize 21 for drinking. So we recognize different ages for different purposes. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Could I have a second to engage that?
Certainly. I'll yield to the gentleman from Kentucky.
Would the chairman join me in co-sponsoring a bill to raise the draft age to 21?
No.
But the chairman feels that their brains aren't fully formed at 18, 19, and 20.
The research does indicate that in certain respects, but the Selective Service needs, I mean, if the country needs people, it needs people.
It needs people whose brains aren't fully formed?
In certain respects, yes.
So,
that is literally the plot of The Matrix. Like, let's use human bodies if we need people to die.
We just need to send them in and take bullets. We need to send you over to a war zone because we need to fulfill the military's industrial complex. We need to do that. We're going to send them over. We're going to send these young men and women to die with their brains aren't fully formed yet. But it's okay for them to vote at 16. It's okay for them to go and die for their country at 18. But it's not okay for them to, now they can't own and protect themselves with a firearm in the United States. You have to be 21 to do that. That's an
extremely unproductive conversation, like, about gun legislation.
Well, I mean, this is where we're at. So instead of having an intelligent discussion about families, I brought up earlier, I said, one of the common denominators in all of this is that, number one, is that all of these weapons are also, they're funneling money to these Democrats and Republicans, right? So Lockheed Martin and all of these different weapons manufacturers, but the maker of the AR-15, it's going right into Ukraine. The same exact weapon from the same company. So these guys are getting money from these guys, and then they're sitting up there making up ridiculous arguments about how we're going to be safer because legal gun owners are going to have to now reduce the amount that they can put into a magazine down to 10 or fewer bullets, which almost every weapon has more than 10 bullets in its magazine. So now you're going to basically eliminate, you're going to make it a felony for anyone who owns these weapons already. And by the way, there's an exclusion for bodyguards. So Nancy Pelosi and all of these other people that have a bodyguard can have magazines with an unlimited number of bullets in them. That's fine. So again, the hypocrisy of Congress, if you have a bodyguard provision, like as a carve out in your bill, then you're okay. So I guess we just all need to hire bodyguards. What if I hire my dad as a bodyguard? You're my bodyguard, Dad.
Most likely it would be I don't know, you'd have to be a licensed bodyguard, I would think.
But again,
the
licensing issue is, yes, it would be great if everyone went and got a license. But of all of the mass murders that we saw over the weekend in Philadelphia and Chattanooga and all these other places, unlicensed, illegal firearms, right? So that's been the huge problem in Philadelphia, where I covered the news for many, many years, every day, right?
Yes.
And so you mean to tell me that you're going after legal gun owners who are constitutionally protected under the Second Amendment? If you want to change it, then vote on a constitutional amendment.
But it's a sad state of our affairs when we have to make a distinguishment between sort of random mass shootings and targeted shootings that are purposeful, that also take out people in the vicinity, and that the fact that we know that one thing won't solve the other, right? So mass shootings are normally done with legally obtained guns, right? And we argue about should that person have legally obtained that gun. But these shootings that we talked about just in this rundown over the weekend are illegal guns, and they are targeted shoots. They are targeted, like the one in the hospital last weekend in Oklahoma where someone was going to hurt the doctor that had given them a diagnosis they didn't like.
But so many people, even in like over the weekend in these 10 mass shootings in America, almost all of the people that died were like bystanders. They were walking down the street just in Philadelphia on South Street in Philadelphia and suddenly shot because they were in the crossfire of this stuff. I mean, these are illegal weapons. But at the end of the day, these people are not going to, if you want the United States to be gunless, good luck. Like if that's where you're moving, which is where Democrats seem to be moving, then you're going to have to put in like a Gestapo style army to go door to door.
Yeah.
I mean, think about, right, what you would have to do, right? You like door to door, literally seizing and you'd have to close the borders.
Well, you'd need you'd need more people than the IRS, like, because there's more guns than people in the United States right now. There's 2.5 guns per
So what
person.
you would do is you would go after all the people that have like signed up and actually got their guns licensed. So those would be the people that would suffer first, right? Because you would go after those people first, the people that hunt, the people that want to protect their family, that are responsible gun owners. So you'd go after those people first. And because you have a list of those people, then all of the illegal guns, how are you going to find those? You're literally going to have to like stop and frisk everybody on the streets of Philadelphia and Chicago and Los Angeles. And is that a bulge in your pocket? And it would be like, it'd be like,
would have to
Weimar
be
Germany.
something that the government wants to do, because the government has rounded up assets before. They took everyone's gold in the 30s, right? And they all
Actually, they
politicians.
didn't. It was illegal to own gold, but there were people that were actually going around the country giving speeches, holding their bar of gold, and the government didn't do anything to them. They walked right up to and they didn't.
Okay,
seize
it wasn't
it.
a confiscation.
They said you couldn't
passed a
do it.
law.
Right, you couldn't have gold, but it was illegal to have gold.
But
But they
it
didn't
did
actually do it.
benefit the government because they told people that they weren't allowed to have gold, and gold was about $20 an ounce. And then as soon as the government had all the gold was suddenly worth $35. So they gave themselves a $15 profit. The thing is, it can be done. Like confiscating things or making certain things illegal has been done in the past. And the government only does it when it benefits the government.
Right. I mean, I just think the contradictions right now, I just want to point out the hypocrisy of these guys in Congress. They're perfectly willing to send billions of dollars in arms and in guns into war zones that they cannot track and they don't have no accountability towards, and will kill all kinds of people. They're fine doing that. Democrats and Republicans are fine doing that. There's a few Republicans actually voted against this.
Sure.
But they're all fine with that. But in the United States, they have a problem with it. And they have a problem with it by going after legal gun owners. They're not even worried about where these get, they're not even looking for illegal guns. And they're not even trying to figure out where they are in the United States. All of the big cities, Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, they just don't know where all of these guns are flowing from. They can't figure it out. There's no movement to try to stop it. And again, I just come back to the one thing they all have in common is that they all don't have a father. Like all of these mass shootings, there's a common denominator. It's a broken home. It's poverty. And why don't you work on addressing that?
It's a breakdown of a culture. We agree on that. It is someone who is severely disconnected from any,
Yeah, you're sending out videos torturing. You're sending out videos of yourself torturing animals. Like that's a person, and you have no father figure. You have no one that's It's a total breakdown of culture. And these communities, again.
But what are you saying though? Like I think we're both agreeing
that
there's
they're
a
not
futility.
addressing the real problem, and I think that they're hypocritical in voting for 40 Democrats in 1 week, literally almost 10 days.
Can you just take a breath? Because I want to ask this question. You're pointing out the futility of rounding up guns, and pointing out how there's different pieces of legal gun ownership and illegal gun ownership. And so are you saying that there is absolutely no solution to this that involves somehow fewer guns?
I mean, somehow
are you just
fewer
completely
guns?
fatalistic about it? Just can't be done. Too many now.
No,
this is the way it is.
I kind of come down on I don't see, the thing is, when you look at the data on the assault weapons ban, and you saw the release of the assault weapons ban, you saw a spike in murders as a result.
Yes.
The repeal of the assault weapons ban. So like that piece of data to me speaks to, is there a necessity in the United States to have assault weapons? And then how do you define that? And that's where Congress seems to be shifty. So do we define it by 10 or more bullets in a magazine and how quickly it can reload? And there's no definition across state lines right now as to what constitutes a gun. And I think Congress is grasping at straws, trying to figure out little meaningless crap to move it from 18 to 21 years old.
But I also don't want to go down the fatalistic route that you've just been pointing out. Like, well, it's just there's guns. Like I see someone in the chat saying Natali is liberal AF, and I'm not saying that I have any alternative solution. I get it that we're trying to parse hairs here, to split hairs to make everybody happy. So it's like, well, you can have this type of gun, but not that type of gun. And will this make you happy? And will this make people safe? And, I feel a bit fatalistic about it too. But I don't know that any kind of like reconnection to culture at this point is going to change the fact that there is a saturation of guns on a continent. 40% of the world's guns are owned by the United States, and which only has 4% of the population of the earth.
And a huge percentage of these gun deaths that people don't talk about, these mass shootings, or not mass shootings, but gun deaths
self-inflicted.
Are self-inflicted.
Yes.
And that is something that is largely dropped from this conversation. People just don't want to, pay attention to that. So, yes, what was it? Australia? Yes, they saw a decline in suicides as a result of. So, if that's our main focus is stopping suicides, then that should be the thing that we're talking about here. Then what's driving people to want to shoot themselves? Maybe there's something we're trying to fix something by slapping a Band-Aid on it at the end. What's driving people to want to hurt themselves? Maybe they don't have
strangers.
And strangers. Maybe they're desperate. They don't have money. They're in poverty. They cannot get a living wage. They see that their government is spending $40 billion on other countries, and they can't pay for gasoline.
Yes.
They can't pay for rent. They can't get food. They're being told that their grain bill, or to buy flour to make the cake that they normally make at their bakery, is now twice as expensive. So they're going out of business with no help from their government. And they see President Biden like next week literally going to be flying to Saudi Arabia to curry favor with basically terrorists.
Yes. I am just pointing out that like thinking through this is extremely dizzying, and it does not seem anymore to boil down to gun control because it does seem so futile. And I don't know. I mean, I don't want to just be criticized of like, we don't know what the alternative is. It seems pretty messed up.
But I think
politicians are at least trying to make well-intentioned change because they know that.
Do you believe that? That's where
I don't know. I don't know about well-intentioned change, but any measure of action at this point is something rather than living
it's
like
not.
this.
It's garbage. It's platitudes and it's politics.
But
That's
it's
what I'm
easy
trying to
for
say.
us to say we work in the news media. If it were up to us to
human
change
beings.
something, what would we do?
Well,
right?
we would, first of all, one thing you do is like if you're one of these liberals in these cities where you have massive gun violence, like why is Philadelphia now for 30 years continue like absolute murders like every day? I guess the news is like, hey, when you've like defunded the police, maybe that's not such a smart idea. When rents are out of control and people can't live there, they don't have a working wage. The transportation system is crap.
Okay, I could take on any one of those things, but I don't think that's where we want to go.
Okay, but my point is that these politicians are just paying. They see these midterm elections coming up, and they're trying to act like they're doing something when in fact they're making up political bullshit, and they actually don't speak to the heart of the problem. And it'd be amazing if one of these Democrats got up and said, you know what, there's a common denominator here that all of these people that are the dads are missing in this, all
when
of this,
we
right?
don't know exactly what we would do. Right? Like if we were in a leadership position, then, right, we're pointing out all the ways that this law is bullshit and this law is bullshit and this law is bullshit. You can't take guns and just like make them smaller, but not for some people. You can't take guns and say, well, these people can have them and these people can't because so much of it is illegal. Like I don't know, right? And so it's hard. I just don't want to be accused.
I have a solution. If Democrats really want to get rid of guns, we have a constitutional republic, right? We have 2/3 majority to amend the Constitution. Like if that's what you want, you really want, and by the way, if Americans want it, and a majority of Americans want it, then amend the Constitution. Get rid of the Second Amendment. We've done that with prohibition. Amend the Constitution. That's why there's an amendment process. But doing all of this like little fiddly crap around the edges is not going to solve the problem. Other countries don't have a constitutional right to bear arms. We do. Yeah. So that's America. So if you don't like it, then change it. If there's enough, so
there's
that's
no
one
half
big way
measure,
to do it.
Is what you're saying. In this, I agree with you. I'm not sure that that's the solution, but I do agree that these half measures are kind of, they're just armpit farts.
Yeah, I mean, because I just want to wrap it up on this, right? So you could amend the Constitution if you really want to get rid of guns altogether, right? But the way the Democrats are doing it is we're going to have, okay, so if you're a gun owner who's registered, you have to make sure that you have it in this particular safe at this particular time. It has to be behind behind a lock and key, safe storage act. It has to be here, here, and here. You have to follow all of these. Do you think the guy that just shot the people in Philadelphia gives a rat's ass about that?
Like where
that
it's
law?
Supposed to be?
Before I went and killed all these people, I did register it. And I did have it in this special safe that I keep right next to Grandma's knitting needles. And I always know I keep it right there next to her little curio cabinet. And that's where I keep it. That's my safe space for my guns. They're not going to do that. The people that are going to get these guns, the illegal guns in the United States that come across the borders and other places, are not going to pay attention to these laws at all. So the laws they're putting out are platitudes, and they're just meant to hurt legal gun owners. And it's just to score political points. That is absolutely all it is. That's in my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think we've said enough about it today, but I wanted to call out the hypocrisy specifically on Ukraine, the same exact weapons going there, and we don't give a rat's ass about whose hands
I think
they
we do. On that distinction, I don't think it's that big of a gotcha, because I think that politicians have decided those guns are awesome for this purpose and not for this purpose. I think that's at least pretty clear.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. They're simpatico when it comes to that. Like, hey, fine, we don't know where those guns go. They're winding up in other people's hands. They're out of our country, and we may end up fighting them eventually. But it's not. It's we're making the money for these military-industrial complexes.
Sure. But I mean, it's I don't think government can see that we're setting an example of like guns for everybody. But then, why are we unsafe?
Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. We've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website, to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.